with Andrew Abadie. He's with Pine Belt Sports and the Eagle Hour as well. So, Andrew, let's start here. We were having the debate conversation, whatever the case may be, centered around what Christian Ostrander should do with his pitching rotation this weekend. Now, it's two different questions. What do you think he should do, and then what do you think he will do?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks, guys, for having me back on. I appreciate it. I wish I could have timed my my shopping a little bit better. But right. Getting back to the question at hand.
That's what quick list is for, Andrew. You just do the click list and then just sit in the car. You don't have to go in.
I know. But anyway, get back to it. So, it's a tough one, and especially because it's the fact that they pitched against Alabama. I know most people are saying, oh, you should save your better guy for the possible better game too, but I look at it a little differently because Matt Adams, who is their number 2, actually pitched against Alabama back in the midweek. And to me, I don't like the idea of letting Alabama see a starting pitcher for a second time in a row. So my thought process is probably a little bit different. Traditionally, Ostrander would go with the rotation as is, and his thought process is to get to the next day. You can't think about the next day because you're not there yet, but it's definitely one to consider moving your guys around, especially because I think Miami and Alabama both have equally potent lineups. I think if it were me, I lean towards pushing JB to Saturday. Normally, I wouldn't say that, but given, like I said, the circumstances of your number 2 guy having seen Alabama, and if you win that day on Saturday, you are in the driver's seat. And I think the biggest thing for Southern Miss is, their pitching staff is set up to win 4 games. But if they go to 5 games and they find themselves in that, if necessary, Monday game, they're in trouble.
Andrew, I want to take what you just said about Alabama having already seen Adams. I want to go a step further because the comment I made just a moment ago before we came back from the break was, do you maybe go a step further and start your number 3 guy against Columbia and try to give yourself Middleton and Adams in a potential closeout kind of situation? Is there a scenario where Graydon Harris could get the ball on Friday?
No. I think, one of the key parts is Southern Miss needs to be very minimal at the start of this thing with going into its bullpen because it's a little more shallow than it typically is. And, Graydon Harris typically, if he does his normal outing, can give you 4 innings, which, in my opinion, even if he does give you that, I think that's too soon. And I also think we're not giving Columbia enough credit. The Ivy League teams tend to be sneaky good in baseball. I read somewhere like 6 out of the last 12 Ivy League teams have made it to like the regional final. Columbia was one of those not that long ago. Columbia also won a series against Alabama back in 2023. Mm-hmm. And looking at their numbers, which I know they have kind of a smaller ballpark, but they're one of the higher scoring offenses in the country. So I don't think you can play around with them too much. I don't know much about their pitching. They don't have ideal numbers, but again, I still think there's a certain degree where you can't let them go into the bullpen early. I mean, that's a big part of it, but also you still got to kind of, in a way, respect Columbia and the fact that if you do find yourself in a track meet, because that wouldn't be ideal for your pitching.
And then was it in the Auburn regional that Southern Mississippi won a couple years ago? Didn't they knock out Penn? Wasn't that the regional final?
That's right, and Penn knocked out Auburn.
Yeah, so yeah, you may have sold me on not going down to the number 3 spot for sure. But go ahead. Alabama's
main closer was on that Penn team 2 years ago. I think he's their guy with 12 saves this year. He's like the electric arm. That's their closer. So there's some familiarity with that regional.
One thing I've know about postseason baseball through the years is there's always a hero that comes out of nowhere that somebody you weren't expecting to have a big role, and they do. Who could that guy be for Southern Mississippi this weekend?
Yeah, I think it could be a lot of guys. We've talked on the show before about how deep their lineup is. And, they've got a few guys that they can DH and put in that can go yard. I mean, Davis Gillespie is a guy who was their starting left fielder for half the season, and he kind of got cold, had a little bit of an injury, but they put him back in the championship. But, that's an experience. Like if you had to go to a pinch hitter late in the game because you're desperate, that is one of the better ones you go to. You've got Braden Luke is another guy that has come off the bench for them and given them some meaningful at-bats. Last year, he was the hottest bat in the postseason for them. They've got a few guys that they can turn to in that DH spot. Looking at the pitching staff, there's a couple guys that, you thought they'd be a little bit better, but they're coming around. And I think two of them to kind of watch for is Josh Ock. Josh Ock had his coming-out party in the postseason last year. He was pretty solid against Coastal last Sunday. And I think another important name that people kind of forget about is Chandler Best, who I would argue won them that regional final game against LSU a couple years ago. I mean, they had no answers for him. And typically he's been a guy that's delivered well for them, quietly well, in the postseason. So that's kind of my four initial guesses. But there's a lot of guys that can, take the moment.
Well, we'll do this one at a time, starting with the aforementioned Alabama. When you saw that they were in Southern Miss's Regional, what did you think? And then now that you've had a chance to look at them a little bit further, what do you think about the potential matchup anyway between Southern Miss and Alabama?
Yeah, I wasn't shocked by it. I thought that was one of the teams that they could get. I thought it was them or Mississippi State, like I'm sure a lot of other people. But my initial thought was it was going to be Alabama and Southern Miss's Regional. And, I think Alabama is maybe one or two wins away from hosting their own regional. They're a really good team, but I think, going back off that midweek from a few weeks ago or a month or so ago, time goes by fast during baseball season. But I thought, Southern Miss kind of blew that game against them, and it wasn't their best day, and they jumped out to a 4-0 lead. It was like 6-6, and then Alabama just had a big inning, and it kind of got away from Southern Miss when they were kind of slumping. And, that wasn't Southern Miss at its best, and they let it get away on the road. I just think I'm normally a pessimist with Southern Miss, but I feel like they should win this regional.
And being a pessimist is always the best idea. A pessimist is never disappointed, Andrew. Never.
But also rarely happy.
Well, you get what you can.
What about Miami as well? Pretty storied program, a big brand, but they do come in as a 3 seed.
Yeah, man, that's the case of the mighty that have fallen. They were up there with Rice and Tulane, and they just seem like one of those programs that for so long was a College World Series contender that has stumbled, and a lot of it's their own doing. It just seems like they haven't given baseball the same thought that they used to. I say that this is their 50th NCAA tournament appearance. But looking at Miami, and a lot of people will look at teams, how they've done as a whole. I'm very big on how teams have performed in their last 10 games, especially in the postseason, as postseason comes around. And they've lost 6 of their last 7 games, and very badly, I might add. I think if I remember my preview right, I think they were outscored like 61 to like 35, but 15 of those runs came against Notre Dame, which was their one win. So, they're not playing very good baseball right now. They got run ruled in the ACC tournament by Cal. I know they were a bubble team. They played one of the toughest schedules in the country, but I just think that's probably one of the most beatable 3-seeded teams in the regionals right now. I know some people are going to be, they look at the brand, but in terms of baseball, they've struggled. Now, they do have some very good players. They got a couple of solid pitchers, but, after like a one-day matchup, I don't know what they really have after they use up their few bullets in the bullpen.
Andrew, man, we really appreciate your time. As always, keep up the good work and enjoy yourself this weekend. Postseason baseball back in Hattiesburg, man.
Yeah, I will, guys. Appreciate you having me on as always.